Hey everybody, I'm Kara, I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for the intro, Maria, and really welcome to everybody who is counting days or anybody who's here for the first time. I did not find the rooms Alcoholics Anonymous until I had like 60 something days sober. So if you're here ahead of that, like you are ahead of where I was, and you're already connected to a solution that it took me a little while to find. So you're doing great. Um, like Maria was saying, I am really privileged to be a part of the host committee for the 64th ICYPAA, which is happening in Austin, Texas this year. It's happening 4th of July weekend. So if you don't have 4th of July plans, we are your 4th of July plans. Like, come hang out with us, see some fireworks right across the street from the hotel. Like, it's going to be fabulous. And, it's been really cool to see the committee put this whole thing on. But I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Um, and first, I'll tell you that I'm an alcoholic. So I have been sober since November 2nd, 2012. I got sober at the age of 21, and I got sober in a college dorm. And those were not things that I planned. Like, I didn't plan to get sober at 21. I thought that I would just be ramping up at that point. I didn't plan to get sober in a college dorm. It was very ungraceful. My roommates drank quite a bit, but that was the option that I had at the time because I didn't know about detox and I didn't know about rehab and I didn't know about, all this stuff that as you get older, you hear, oh, so and so went to rehab, right? And you learn that that's a thing. Like, I didn't know that that was a thing yet. Um, and so, anyways, I found Alcoholics Anonymous when I think I went to my first meeting when I was 30 days sober, but they were wacky. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But then I went to my second meeting and then stayed when I was 60 something days sober. And this was in Boston, Massachusetts, where I was living at the time. And, it was a very young city. And so I was fortunate that I found a lot of young people at meetings that I went to, but that didn't mean that I always felt like I was a part of. Because what my alcoholism looked like was hitting a spiritual bottom really quickly, right? I had had, drinks when I was very young. I come from a family that has a lot of drinkers in it. And so there was always booze around. But I didn't start drinking because, like, on my own, like for the effect until I was in high school. And what that looked like for me was that I felt like the world hurt when I was sober. Like, everything was just hitting a raw nerve. And I had all these resentments that I didn't know were resentments. I thought it was just everybody was doing me wrong. And the world shouldn't work like that. And this is unfair. And why is it so hard? And I feel like I can't breathe in this world, right? Like, everything just didn't feel okay. And you could call that teenage angst. You could call that all sorts of things. But what makes me an alcoholic is that when I drink, something happens to me that doesn't happen to the average person. And alcohol for me really treated that internal spiritual condition that I was suffering from. And, I wanted to tap out of this world at the age of 14. You know, a kid at my school had gotten high on 420 and hung himself at a party. And most of the people in the community came together and like trying to support each other and trying to support his family and all that kind of stuff. A very normal, same reaction. And for me, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Because I had been piling on all the reasons why I didn't want to be a part of this world. And that was the one that it was, if this is the kind of world that this is, I don't want to be a part of it, right? Like, if God lets kids kill themselves, I don't want to have anything to do with that kind of higher power. And within a week, I'm stealing liquor out of my mom's liquor cabinet, right? And I'm not popular. I wasn't Miss Social, whatever butterfly. I was a nerd. I was on the debate team. I was really mean and quite foul to a lot of people at school because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin that I was like the nerdy bully, if that even makes sense. I'm sure you can picture it, but like the jerk of a bully that was still a complete dweeb. So that was me. And I would like scream at people about how they didn't know anything. And I thought I was smarter than everybody. And nobody was inviting me to parties. Okay. And so my drinking started with me taking liquor from my mom's liquor cabinet to have after I got home from soccer practice and before I did my homework. Right. Like, that was how it started for me. And I really had this thought of, I just need to take the edge off. right? And if that's all that my drinking ever was this like drinking to take the edge off, I wouldn't be here. Okay. Like I really would not be here because alcoholism is a progressive disease. And if I could have stayed at just like a couple of drinks to take the edge off, like I'd still be doing that because that effect worked for me. It made it feel like there was more oxygen in the room and I could breathe for a second. And it was just this like when I had alcohol in me. And it's not that I thought that I didn't have problems because I had some real problems at that time, which I don't have enough time to get into tonight. But like I knew that there were issues, but I felt like I could deal with them because I felt present for a second. Right. And I love that this group is called the fifth dimension group because, there's this part in the book where it talks about how we're rocketed into the fourth dimension. Right. And my little nerdy self loved that the fourth dimension was time. I get rocketed into the here and now. And that's what alcohol did for me is it made it so that I was even in the room with you so that I wasn't just spinning in my head and I wasn't just fearful about whatever was going to happen next. And I wasn't worried about what happened yesterday and what you thought of me for what happened yesterday. I was just good. And I would have kept doing that, except when I start drinking, this thing happens where it's a flip. It's like a switch that gets hit. And when I start, I cannot guarantee you I'm going to stop. And what that looked like for me is, you can't tell how short I am on Zoom, but I am just shy of 5 feet. Uh, and I'm a feisty little drunk. I'm a point my finger in your face, bouncer man kind of drunk. I tend to walk through dark alleys on my own because nobody is moving fast enough to get to the bar. I am the drinking the empties off of the, basement floor at whatever frat house, trying to find the alcohol that's left over and accidentally drinking your cigarette butts, accidentally drinking your urine. Like I am a foul, gross kind of drunk, right? And I got in some scrapes. And what ended up happening was that um I wanted to not get those consequences anymore, right? I didn't want to keep ending up at places where I was not, you know, like I didn't have control over what was going to happen to me because the people I was surrounded with were a little sketchy. I didn't want to keep coming home covered in bruises. I didn't want to keep being the person that was ruining relationships. I didn't want to keep showing up to work drunk. I didn't want to call my mom screaming on the phone. I didn't want to worry my best friends, right? I kept hooking up with guys that I thought were so unattractive, right? Like, and I didn't want that to be my life, like my friends would look at me and say, like, you literally don't like this man. Why are you hanging out with him? And they thought that it was a problem with my character, right? It had nothing to do with him. It was the fact that like I would say one thing and then do the exact other, and it was this like bizarre thing before the age of 21, right? And so, what do you do with a person like that? Because I couldn't imagine a world where I didn't get to keep drinking because I was so uncomfortable sober. And every time that I was sober, I ended up getting drunk again, right? Because that discomfort was just too much. And at some point, it would be a good idea to drink, right? Or it seemed like a good idea to drink. And that thing would, flip in my mind. All of a sudden, I'm off to the races. And then, remorse, morbid reflection, like all the kind of stuff that comes after it too. So I didn't want to come to AA. I wanted to die, frankly. I just was going to bed at the end of my drinking, hoping to not wake up the next morning. And I would wake up really pissed that I woke up. And I would drink, and then I would go to bed, hoping to die in my sleep. And I would wake up the next morning pissed that I woke up. And where I got sober in Boston, there were a lot of folks that were struggling with fentanyl at the time. This was back in, the early 2010s time, and Massachusetts was really the epicenter of a lot of the opioid crisis at that point in time. And when I started going to meetings, I would hear things like people would say, "Oh, people are dying out there," you know? And I got to tell you, that didn't scare me. Like, that wasn't my problem. That was my plan. Like, that was what I was going for, right? Like, I did not want to live life sober. That sounded terrible. And I also didn't want to live life continuing to get into the kind of scrapes and demoralizing situations that I kept ending up in. But what I was really afraid of was that I was going to go to bed every night hoping to die in my sleep, and that I was going to wake up in the morning pissed that I woke up every day for the rest of a long, miserable life. And I was pretty damn sure that I was going to live until I was in my 90s and that there were good 70 something years ahead, right? And so that is the fear that made me willing to do anything that you told me to do. And I'm really fortunate that I pretty quickly found a group of folks that got me involved. My first home group was a group called the Brookline Group, and they gave people service commitments. And so I stood at the door and I handed out raffle tickets for the literature, and I did not want to. I threw a complete temper tantrum about it. I told my first sponsor I thought it was the dumbest job in the world and that it was enabling addictive behavior with a bunch of personalities to give out raffle tickets. And I had this whole treatise. And then I went and stood at the door and did it anyway, because what else was there? I had no ideas left. Like, if I had any other ideas, I would not have come today. But I did what they suggested. And, that first sponsor was really great about getting me involved in the fellowship. And she got me plugged into meetings, she got me plugged in with people. And she just didn't have a lot of experience when it came to ninth step amends. And I got stuck there. And, I ended up really spinning my wheels at about a year sober, where the behavior that I was doing sober was a lot more objectionable than a lot of the stuff that I'd been doing while I was drinking. Um, and if you've had that experience, I really empathize with it. It is such a painful place to be, to know that like you've already bottomed out with alcohol and yet you kind of want to blow your brains out because of the stuff you're doing sober. Like, that sucks. And I am so sorry if that's where you are. But what I will tell you is that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, when I really did it and all of it, worked for me. Right. Like, I met a woman who was willing to tell me, and she was young. She had also gotten sober at 21, and she was willing to be louder than my brain was. Because my brain thought that I should be the chairperson of every meeting. I should be the speaker at every meeting. I should be the, little miss running AA at age 22, even though I had not fully worked the 12 steps. I had made two like kind of easy amends and done them badly. And by badly, I mean I made amends to somebody for having an inappropriate relationship with them, and then I slept with them. Okay. Like, that's the kind of mess that I was doing at about a year sober. And then, I'm just muck, but this woman that I met was loud, like really loud. And she had this obnoxiously happy laugh. And she was willing to tell me, because she cared more about me, like actual me, than my ego, that I had not done the program of Alcoholics. And she was willing to be really clear about what that program looked like in our literature, and that it meant that I do all of my amends, not the convenient ones. And it means that I reach my hand out to the people that need help, not the people that I want to be friends with. Right. It means that I'm willing to be quiet when it's time to be quiet and not have to be the person with the word on everything. And that I go to the places that people don't want to go. And that I'm willing to do the things that people don't want to do, because this life is not mine. Right. And, that woman saved my butt. And she's not my sponsor today, but I am so grateful for that experience, because, it really taught me what it meant to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the responsibility that we have here, and the freedom that I've been given as a result of that. And, I thought that it was going to be this punishing, terrible thing that, like, now I have to do all this stuff she's telling me to do. But what she really gave me was a path to freedom. Like, I wanted to die not doing the stuff that she was saying, right? Even sober, I wanted to not be here. And when I start doing these things and taking these directions, like, all of a sudden I have beautiful relationships in my life. And I'm not saying that like the money came or the whatever came, like, life is life. I actually, one of the most misquoted pieces in our literature is when people say, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. When what our book really says is what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. Right? Because I am the thing that changed. The job was the same. The apartment was the same. The way that I felt about those things, completely different. The way that I was able to show up for my family, completely different. Like, the world still had problems. No longer was I the world's victim. I was somebody that was capable of helping with a solution instead of just whining about the problem, right? Like, things shifted. And as a result of that attitude change, I had I started seeking out different opportunities and ways that I could be of service. And that got me moving to different parts of the country. I had moved out to the Bay Area in Berkeley for a little while to do some school. And, I got to do AA out there. And then I moved to Texas about 3.5 years ago. No, more than that, almost 4 years ago at this point. And, for a job. And I got to see what AA looked like here. And I'll tell you that when I was in Boston, I thought that the only good way to do AA, because I'm a nerd, right? Remember, was to be involved in general service, right? Young people's committees, like, no thanks, not really AA. I was one of those, right? And I will tell you, like, as the alternate chair of the 64th ICYPAA, I will tell you that I was one of those people. Okay. So, I thought that it was great that these things existed. I would go to the conferences, I like spoke on the panels, whatever, but I never like sat all the way in on it. Like I just wasn't fully invested in young people. And I think part of that was that I was in a city that was so young and there were young people all around me. And when I started moving around, I, was in the burbs in the East Bay. And then I was, Austin is a city, but it's nowhere near as dense of a city as other places I've lived. And I got to see that oftentimes at, I'm now 32, I am still the youngest person in the room by a mile, right? And it's sometimes hard to find the other young people in that city. And so I started to really understand how important it was for there to be somebody that was not only like someone I could identify with as an alcoholic, but somebody that could grow up with me sober, right? That could do life with me sober. Because I did my 20s all in AA. Your 20s are messy, whether you are sober or drunk. Okay. Like I was practicing the principles in all my affairs to the best of my abilities, and I was still a foolish 20 something. That is just how it is. It is normal. And every time I would talk to my sponsor, she would say, like, this is just normal developmentally. Like, this isn't a spiritual malady. You're just 24, like whatever. But anyways, when I got here, I found that the people that like clicked with me in terms of their level of responsibility for Alcoholics Anonymous, the way that they were reaching their hand out to everyone, not just the people they wanted to be friends with, the way that they cared about accessibility, and the way that they were involved with the general service structure and were, really informed on like all 36 of AA's principles, not our 12 steps. Those people were bidding to host ICYPAA, right? And so I found myself rolling with that crew of people because they told me that they needed more women on the committee, right? And one of my favorite things is I got to be the chair the year that we bid and were awarded ICYPAA this past year in San Francisco. And one of my favorite things about that year is we went from a committee of, it was like 30% women to a committee of like 55% women in the year that I was chair, right? Because we knew that there were more young women that wanted to be involved, but they were scared, And so like that's just one way in which we, have been able to change the lives like on a very micro level. But I'm really excited about all the stuff that we get to do in hosting ICYPAA this year and, getting to show folks a new experience of what it's like to be sober and young, but also, how to make sure that we're reaching the next sick and suffering. So I know that I'm just about out of time. What I hope to leave you with is that, you know, I am not somebody that did this stuff perfectly whatsoever. I'm not the person that when I talk, you think that God is sitting in the chair next to me, right? Like I've listened to those speakers that talk about God like he is right there in the flesh and like, whatever. Okay. I am somebody that for the longest amount of my sobriety, it has been group of drunks. I am somebody that, I really needed to act my way into right thinking. I didn't just get zapped with a spiritual experience. I needed to do the footwork in order to get there. And part of that is because I happened to walk into the woods a long way with stuff other than alcoholism while I was out there, as an alcoholic. And I needed to walk out of the woods quite a bit in order to heal. But, you know, part of that is also just like my personality. And I'm not somebody that believes in things until I truly experience the effect. I don't like to just buy in. I'm not a joiner. I like rebel against everything by nature. I don't want to believe what you believe. Like I want to have my own thing and have my own experience. And I'm stubborn, right? And what I can tell you is that Alcoholics Anonymous has worked for me even when that has been true, right? Even when like I am stubborn and all I'm doing is the footwork because I want to prove to you that it's not going to work, or even when I'm doing the footwork and not believing it'll work and, just doing it anyway because this is my last option, like it has still kept me sober and it has continued to build for me like a really wonderful, beautiful life that I wouldn't trade for anything, even on the days when a drink does pop into my mind, because I am still an alcoholic. So thanks so much for letting me share and really glad to be here. Thank you.